you to know that somehow I too am human. I cry too, I'm lonely too, I need too, and that I need you just as desperately as you need me. And on that level we can start communicating, and on that level we can start to learn from each other, which is what a learning situation always is, if it's a truly learning situation.
Dr. Leo Buscaglia, Professor of Education at the University of Southern California. In an address before an audience at the University of California at Davis, Dr. Buscaglia takes us on a journey into the world of human potential in The Art of Being Fully Human.
I'd like to tell you something first before I begin. You know, I usually begin by telling you stories about my name because it's such a wonderful name, and I do love it so. It's spelled B-U-S-C-A-G-L-I-A, and it gives everybody enormous problems, and it's a wonderful way of introducing yourself and getting to know people because it's an outrage. And the one I love the best is what I always tell, and that is I placed a long-distance telephone call several years ago, and the line was busy, and the operator said that as soon as the line was finished, she'd call me, and so on. And so when the phone rang about 5 or 10 minutes later, I picked it up, and she said, "Would you please tell Dr. Boxcar that his telephone call is through?" I said, "Could that be Buscaglia?" She said, "Sir, it could be damn near anything." And it's the truth, and not only that, but no, most of you know, if you've read my books or anything else, that my name is really not Leo. Leo comes from my middle name, which is Leonardo, and that's nice, too. And my first name I really love, but I don't ever dare use, and I'll tell you why in a minute, but my first name is Felice, and that means peace and joy and love. Those of you who speak Italian know. So if you see it all together, it's Felice Leonardo Buscaglia, which is like a Verdi opera, you know. I love it. And several years ago, I was asked to take a tour, touring around in Asia and speaking to groups and so on. I had to get federal clearance because I would be going into Army camps and Navy camps and Air Force camps and so on and so forth. And I was in a large room in Los Angeles in the federal building, about half the size of this one, filling out little forms and giving it to a little man behind a cage, you know, who checks you out, makes sure everything's okay. And then when he's ready for you, he calls your name over a microphone. And I knew this was going to present a problem because if you think of Felice Leonardo Buscaglia, it may be good for Verdi, but it's not so good for Mr. Smith, you know. And so I knew that he had reached mine. He had had no trouble with Sally Jones and James Brown and everything else. But I knew he reached mine when he sort of picked it up and looked at it and did a double take, like what freak could have a name like this? And then he took a deep breath, and he started with my first name, and he said, "Phyllis?" And I swear I'll answer anything but Phyllis. Not that I don't like the name Phyllis, it's lovely, but it doesn't suit me, not quite. Last night I was talking to my nephew, who's only 5 and a half, and he's really curious, and he's in that stage that most of you know, that magical stage where kids are running around brailing the world, you know. And they're curious about everything. It's so sad that we stop them, you know. They want to braille, and we say, don't touch that, and don't put it like that. No, the world is not set up for children. That's a great pity, because some of us could still do a lot of brailing and learn along. Perhaps one of the most beautiful moments in my life was when I spoke to a group of blind people, and after it was over, it was a very large group, it was a national conference, one of these beautiful blind men came up and said, "Dr. Buscaglia, may I braille you? Have you ever been braille?" I know you've been felt, but not braille. That's a different thing. It was like having a cool breeze or an electrical current running over your skin. And first of all, I'd like to start by getting us in a common frame of reference. Now, some of you, I always am a little bit confused as to where to begin, because I know that some of you have read my books because you've written me, and wonderful letters, and or you've seen tapes of mine, or you've owned them, and you know pretty much where my head is. And others of you, and it's right that it should be that way, have no idea who I am. And that's good, too, because then we can get acquainted tonight and sort of verbally braille each other. And if you want to do more, I'll stand down here and we can do more later on. You know that I'm a big Italian hugger. Mommy used to say you can believe something when you touch it. So if you want to be believed, you know. Anyway, I'd like to get us in a common frame of reference so that we know pretty much where we stand and what I'm going to be talking to you about tonight, which is a subject that is really keen to my heart, and that is the art, literally the art, of being fully human. I don't know about you, but I really love the concept that I am a human being and have all the potential to be a human being, with all that this means, which we'll get into tonight as far as some of the things that I believe. But people always want to know, like, when did this begin? When did you begin to become really interested? I don't know, but I do know that there was a moment in my life that was most significant, and everywhere I go, I always start by telling that moment, because to me it's very significant and made a difference, and maybe it's responsible for my being here tonight. It was about 12 or 13 years ago when I first started at the University of Southern California. And I had one of those mandatory classes, you know, that everybody has to take. And I was an assistant professor at the time, and I had to teach it, you know. And so I got, before it was a big, they used Bovard Auditorium, a big barny place that some of you know. And I got in front of this audience, and I thought, how will I ever reach them? How will I ever touch them? And it was really a kind of a traumatic situation to be put into for your first class. But that's what happens, you know. Anyway, I stood before the class, and I have many things that I feel very strongly about. And one is that the first thing I do when I get before an audience is I look for kind eyeballs. When the audience is in blackness, I'm lost. Talking to myself is not one of my passions. But when I can see eyeballs, I know that I'm safe. And to me, kind eyeballs are the kind of eyeballs that stay there, and when you get lost or you say something stupid and you don't remember what you said before, you look at them and they say, come on, Buscaglia, you can do it, you know. And I'm amazed at how many such eyeballs there are. And in this class, I looked around frantically for eyeballs, and since it was a class that was in there because they didn't want to be mostly, I didn't see too many eyeballs. I was seeing this. Or they were looking at their, you know, pencil ready to take down anything I said. That's something we've conditioned you. You write everything down. I can say, drop dead. Everybody writes it down. It's going to be a trick question on the exam. Anyway, I did find these eyeballs, and I found them in a very exciting young lady about 5 rows back. And I knew they were my eyeballs because whatever I said, she lit up and had a response. She may not have agreed, but I could tell that she was feeling something, and I knew there was at least one alive person in this class of something like 600 people, and I knew that she could save me. And I was delighted. And I have a lot of things in my classes that all of my students and all of my friends know I call voluntarily mandatory. And one of the things that's voluntarily mandatory is that everybody come and see me in my office at least once every semester. Now, that isn't asking too much. But you'd be surprised how many people that intimidates. You know, what does he want to see me for? Well, I try to tell my students, you know, I don't believe you until I can have you in my close proximity. And also, since I am a passionate Italian, I will believe you when I touch you. So when you come and see me, I'm going to touch you. You know, and if that bothers you, take your tranquilizer. And then, you know, when I go out of my office and I see Sally sitting there, I say, hi, Sally. And she says, hello. And I take her hand, her little sweaty palm, and I cover it with mine, and I slowly lead her into the office. And I can sort of see by her eyes, she's thinking, my God, what is he going to do to me, you know? I'm not going to do anything to you, Sally. I just want to relate to you person to person. I want you to know that somehow I, too, am human. I cry too, I'm lonely too, I need too, and that I need you just as desperately as you need me. And on that level we can start communicating, and on that level we can start to learn from each other, which is what a learning situation always is, if it's a truly learning situation. And you know, sometimes when I'm before an audience like this, it makes me feel frustrated as well as humble, because I know that everybody in this audience has something to teach me. That if I were able to be close to you, you could give me as no one else in this world can. And so I don't want to miss it, at least from my students. And so I have this voluntarily mandatory thing. And it's incredible, as I said, how it intimidates people. Probably the funniest thing that ever happened was one girl that came in and sat across from me, and I knew there was something wrong because her eyelids were shutting and her head was falling forward, you know. And finally I said, are you all right? And she said, oh, Dr. Buscaglia, I can't stay with you anymore. She said, in order to get up enough guts to come and see you, I drank a bottle of Ripple and I'm going to be sick. Imagine stooping to Ripple. I'm happy to say that things have changed. But nevertheless, one of the big things is that I don't believe that anything can transpire unless we can learn this marvelous process of somehow or other coming together, human being to human being, however we define it. And I was eagerly waiting for this girl to come and see me because I am ego involved with my friends and my lovers and my students, and I wanted them desperately. I want them to know that I am. And I wanted to say to her, thank you for being alive. Thank you for sharing your enthusiasm and your eagerness and your vibrations. Thank you for making me a better teacher. And about 5 weeks into the semester, this beautiful young girl was not in her seat. And when Monday, Wednesday, Friday came, I became curious, and I went down to where she sat and asked the people around her what had happened to her. And do you know, in something like 6 weeks of school, they didn't even know her name. It's no wonder that Schweitzer says, you know, we're all so much together in our world, and yet we're all dying of loneliness. And I truly believe it. We either don't know how to express it, or even if we feel it, we're intimidated by it. We don't know how to reach out and say, look, lonely person, take my lonely hand. We can be stronger this way. And so I went to the Dean of Women and I asked about her. And Joan is a very lovely girl and said, oh, Leo, I'm sorry. Haven't I told you? This girl went to Pacific Palisades, which is an area in Los Angeles that many of you know where sheer cliffs fall into the sea. And there were people there having a picnic on the grass, and they saw her drive her car up. She left the ignition running, and zombie-like, she walked across the grass, and without a moment's hesitation, threw herself off onto the rocks below. She was 22. It was a good thing that happened to me in a tragedy. Because all of a sudden I asked myself, what does it matter that we've taught this girl to read and to write and to spell and to do all the things that we think are essential if no one along the line taught her the sacredness of being alive and taught her the dignity and the wonder of her own personal self so that she could easily take it? And I remember being terribly moved by something that I read in a book of Chaim Ganat's, probably his last book. And it read like this, and some of you I've shared this with, but bear with me because it will lead us down the path that I hope we can take together tonight. It's a very poignant thing, and it's written by a school principal who gave this to Ganat. She said, I'm a survivor of a concentration camp. My eyes saw what no person should witness. Gas chambers built by learned engineers. Children poisoned by educated physicians. Infants killed by trained nurses. Women and babies shot and killed by high school and college graduates. So I'm suspicious of education. My request is, help your students to be human. Your efforts must never produce learned monsters, skilled psychopaths, or educated icons. Reading and writing and spelling and history and arithmetic are only important if they serve to make our students human. And you know what occurred to me? We teach everything in the world to people except the most essential thing, and that is life. Nobody teaches you about life. You're supposed to know about it. Nobody teaches you how to be a human being and what it means to be a human being and the dignity that it means when you say, I am a human being. Everyone assumes this is something you have or you should have gotten by osmosis. And you know, it's not working by osmosis. I did a rap show this morning on the radio, and I always love to do those things because you encounter so many beautiful people. And everybody wants the definition. Isn't that interesting? Dr. Buscaglia, will you define love? And I say, no. If you follow me around, I'll try to live it. It's very difficult to define because it's such an enormously broad concept. And the more I live in joy and beauty, the greater lover I become. And so every day I'm becoming a greater and greater and greater lover. And to define it would be to somehow delimit it. But at least along the way, I kind of have an idea where I am. But I also know that if I put my hand out, you could give me new definitions, new strokes, new ideas. And together we could grow to the extent to which we can all of a sudden realize that we're not individual lonely lovers. We're all one, you and me. You know, there's one thing I'm sure of. There are maybe 2,000 people here tonight. There isn't one person who hasn't known loneliness. Isn't that wonderful? There isn't one person that hasn't known despair. Isn't that wonderful? There isn't one person that hasn't cried. But also, there aren't many that haven't laughed, that haven't known joy. And in all those ways, we can communicate we're alike. Because I've known it too. And we're all involved in the same struggle to become fully human, which is the best thing we can become. And what a goal. What a wonderful goal. You know, I always think of Thoreau, that marvelous man, and the statement that he made, "O God, to have reached the point of death, only to find that you have never lived at all." What a tragedy when life is your prerogative. It's your right to live. It's your right to know joy. You know, I had a Buddhist teacher once that used to talk about, and the word excites me, rapture. Have you ever known rapture? Oh, you've known ecstasy and joy and all of those things, happiness, but have you ever known rapture? Well, do you know rapture is your right as a human being? Don't leave life without knowing rapture. And so to me, probably the most exciting thing in the world is the realization that I have the potential of being fully human. I can't be a God, but I can be a fully functioning human being. And what I'd like to do tonight is talk to you about some of the things that I think that are essential in order to become a fully functioning human being. And if I want to continue to be a fully functioning human being under these lights, I'm going to have to start taking my clothes off. And so this is number one. And you can join me, you know, just let's go.